Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Raisa Lopez, ISV Account Manager at IIG. We're so happy to have you here with us today to learn more about our light manufacturing solution, AcuWorkOrder. This will be a brief presentation to demonstrate general functionality. So if there's anything that, if there's a need that you may have that is not shown today, please make sure to respond to my follow-up email and we'll be happy to jump on a one-on-one call. I also want to encourage you to type your questions in at any time and we'll address them at the end of the call. Okay, here we see some of the most common process challenges that small manufacturers are facing. Work order scheduling and routing, optimizing production schedules, material requirements and inventory management, purchasing to meet anticipated production demands, work order cost tracking, real-time visibility, jobs scheduled and in process, inventory requirements, and costs. Our AcuWorkOrder addresses all of these challenges, and Alec will be showing us how. Before we get started, just wanted to give a quick introduction in case we haven't worked together before. We have been in Acumatica, ISV, and VAR for 6 years now. We have over 25 years of ERP and business process management solution experience. We have published 16 enhancements for Acumatica, 9 of which have earned certification by Acumatica and are on the Acumatica price list, including AcuWorkOrder. 2 of those modules, AcuGmail and AcuPOS, now Acumatica's POS, were acquired by Acumatica. And we have worked with over 100 different Acumatica partners as well. And I just wanted to share a couple reviews that we have. This one is from Rich Wood at the Answer Company. And here is another one from Dean Slater at DSD. You can also find more reviews on our website, on our main page, as well as a client success tab on there. Okay, with that being said, I will pass you over to Alec, and Alec is our Chief Solutions Architect, as well as a 3-time Acumatica MVP Award winner.
Thank you, Raisa. I'll wait for you to share my screen. Thank you for joining us today. And here we are. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to go over this PowerPoint presentation that would let us get an understanding overview of the AcuWorkOrder product. And I'll show you a little bit about the software. As Raisa mentioned, please feel free to give us a call and we'll have a one-on-one session to do a discovery and a demonstration. So what the work order management AcuWorkOrder does, it gives you the ability to create manufacturing work orders. And we track for the created work orders, quantity on work orders required for work orders. Will go through all the different bill of material levels and come back and tell you what you need to order, what you need to produce if you have sub-assemblies. We have a nice drag and drop scheduling board that would let you basically schedule your work order and you could create your own additional views. We have a nice dashboard that would show your utilization by machine code, by month, which we'll look at. Some of the other things that we do, as I mentioned, we will go through all the different bill of material levels, kit levels entered for the item, and come back and tell you what you need to manufacture. And you can even enter a date, and it would show you for that entered ship date what you need to manufacture, what you need to buy. We also do auto scheduling of your work orders. So you can either, when you're entering a sales order, see what kind of promise that you can give to the customer based on other sales orders that are in the system and other need for manufacturing product, whether made to stock or made to order. We'll let you do forward or backward scheduling. Some of the other functionality. So as part of the work order, you get a repair management software that will let you do repair. And when you do a repair, you're not producing a new item, you're changing the cost of the product that you're repairing. We'll let you do full assemblies, full disassemblies, partial disassemblies. If you're harvesting some parts, you could do that and receive the product into stock. Optional equipment P&L schedule services of some equipment that you're using in-house. If you have your construction company and you have equipment and you need to perform some scheduled services, you can define those as part of an optional add-on. The same thing with equipment P&L. How much does it cost you to maintain an equipment? Whether you use an AP bill or you use a field service work order or the work order module will show you the expense that you incurred for that product. Phantom bills, you could have a phantom bill where you load the component as a phantom bill itself, or you load the components of that bill into the work order with its own step. Overhead allocations we support. Outside processing, we have a complete outside processing scheme set up in it where a routing step could be an outside process, and we will actually generate the PO to the vendor for processing. Doing the work will create a transfer sales order to ship the product out to the vendor, and when you enter the AP bill from the vendor, will create a transfer sales order, bringing the product back, and it's all managed in the system in Acumatica, all the work orders and so forth. You do QC functions for some manufactured items. You can define that, whether you're receiving a product or manufacturing it up, or you can do a QC function. And we have some functionality added for process manufacturing, so you can enter a mold for the item, you can enter components as percentage of batch size, you can produce multiple finished goods for a product. So for example, as part of the demo I have where you're creating a purple paint and you're using 3 or 4 different paints as ingredients, creating a batch of purple paint, and you put that into 1 liter, 3 liter, and 5 liter cans of paint, and system would manage all of that. We do part tracing if you're doing food production and you need to see what was produced. On our roadmap is the work order assignment and approval process for work orders that will be managed. So this is the first screen we're looking at. This is our scheduling board. So each one of these cells represent a routing step, what we call a manufacturing transaction. Based on the routing defined, you can have 1 or multiple steps in the manufacturing of an item. If you double click on it, it will open it. If you right click on it, you can change the status now. You see different colors. Those colors indicate the status of that manufacturing transaction, whether it's on the shop floor, whether it's released, whether it's closed. And when you create these views, you could create the views so each row represents 1 hour, 2 hours, 8 hours, a shift. So you can create different views, and by using this arrow, you can select the view that you're looking at. So you can have a view that is filtered just to show you what's released or what's in the planning stage. This is the dashboard, one of the dashboards, which basically shows you your machine capacity forecast for the next so many days. Each one of these lines representing a machine, or utilization for the last 12 months, which months you've utilized what machine, what work center for what amount, and your open work orders that are in the system. This one basically is a production chart. Each one of these dates represents the day, and we'll show you each work order, what machine it's on, and when it's scheduled to be worked on, which date on what machine code. This will be the machine. So this is where you start setting up the system. One of the first things you do is the work order types. As you can see, there are different work order types: production, partial disassembly, scheduled services or repair. So that's one of the first things you enter when you enter a type. You tell it what type of work order it is, work order type it is, and based on that, systems behavior changes, letting you do some of your work, your different machine codes, your different statuses, and these are used whether it's the scheduling board or different generic inquiries to create the desired views. So this is the kit specification form of Acumatica. We've added a lot of functionality to this. We support the kit specification as is, but we add functionality. For example, you see a routing here, tree assembly, which is used to tell Acumatica how many manufacturing transactions it needs to create. Notice the next thing that probably is important is the group ID. So when you define components, you link those components to group codes A, B, C, and you link those group codes to different routing steps. So the system knows that which components need to be loaded into first step in the manufacturing process or the last one. So you can decide if you want to issue all those components in the very first step, very last step, or throughout the manufacturing process. Some of the other things you see here is whether you have an option, and if you have options, it will let you define options and tell for each option what routing step is added or what components need to be added. We manage yield percentage and scrap. That's to know what to calculate as demand. So if you have something that is a yield percentage of 80, 50% or 80% or a scrap of 10%, when it's figuring out what components you needed, what quantity, it will take these numbers into calculation, tell you what you need to produce of the finished good or what components you need to buy at what quantity. This is where you set up your options. In this example, we're saying the options are light, power, and battery operated. And for the basically power, if it's 220, we just add this component to the work order, and we add a routing step called assembly into the manufacturing process. As I've said, we go through all the levels of the bill of material here. We're showing you the manufacturing tree. For that item, notice that it has the high level, then you have this level, and that has its own level. We will show you what parts are needed for each level, and as I've mentioned in our MRP screens, we'll go through all the levels that are defined and come back and tell you what you need, what actions you need to take. So this is at the routing. So this is the routing. We're manufacturing and candy cane Christmas decoration. And we have 4 steps defined. You can have as many steps as you want to define. In the first step, we're putting the product, we're bringing the product, then we're assembling the frame, installing ornaments and lighting and the packaging, and we're telling it that for each step, what is the run type is a fixed hours per operation, fixed, or operation per hour. So we'll use this as it's doing the auto scheduling. Some of the other things that we see here is basically a manufacturing. So when you see a checkbox is manufacturing, that's the step that when closed, we will create a kit assembly transaction in Acumatica. So when you create a work order in our system, we load the components based on the kit specification and routing into manufacturing transactions created. Again, we create a manufacturing transaction for routing steps defined here. For this routing, it will be 4 of them. This is the step that when closed will create the kit assembly. The rest of them we just issued to inventory. So now one of the things we do when you release the step, we put that inventory aside and in a bin location that is not available to be viewed. But before releasing and closing a manufacturing step, you allocate inventory. When you allocate inventory, basically we create an issue with the component, so that inventory is put aside. So when you're looking at different Acumatica screens, that inventory is not available to be consumed, whether lot-based or otherwise in the system. Now, when something is allocated, you can unallocate it. So if you pull the product for a work order, manufacturing transaction, if something happened, you want to release it to use for another manufacturing transaction, ship it to a customer, you can unallocate it and use that inventory. But once you release this step, the inventory is moved to a different bin location and no longer can be reversed. Now we also do VIP posting. So if you want to post a VIP to GL as a step is released by option, it will go ahead and post that to VIP, and that VIP will get released, reversed when the manufacturing time, the kit assembly transactions. One other point here is you can define steps like it's called cells, and for those steps in the manufacturing process, what we do, we load the labor and component entered into the sales order. So if you have make to order work orders, you can easily set up a step as this is cell, and if there are optional things that you're doing, polishing, you can load those labor and material into the sales order and invoice the customer. Or you can let everything stay as every step be an issue, and it basically become part of the finished good, produce the cost of the parts and labor used, and you basically be selling it. So this is our MRP screen. This is basically what we do here. We go through the Acumatica's inventory system. I'll come back and load every item here. We'll tell you what's the calculated demand. Now, what's calculated demand could be based on entered ship date. So if you want to see what inventory you need, to ship all the sales orders that are in the system to the for September. You enter the end of September here as a date, and only those transactions are taken into account. Now, what some of the other things you can do, you can look at an item class, a warehouse code, or a certain ABC code, and you're planning, or you could basically work with series of items. Maybe you do your replenishment for batteries on the 1st of the month, on the 10th of the month, you do your alternators. You could save the created list of items with a name, and next time when you come to this program, you can enter batteries, and it will only load all the items that are battery series, so you can do your work with just those group of items, whether you're buying them or whether you're manufacturing them. Notice that you have generate work orders, generate transfer sales orders, create POs. These are all functions, and do an auto schedule. So based on what you do, you select the items and you can create a PO. Now notice there's a what if quantity. Basically, this what if quantity is loaded from an uploaded file. So if you have an Excel or then and you work on it and you have demands that have been created and you want to load that forecast by customer, you can load it and you can set it up for that the MRP run is only for the what if quantity, or the what if quantity is added to the calculated demand. And then we go through all the bill of material levels and tell you what you need to manufacture, the sub-assembly, or what components you need to buy. You could see the demand by week here. We click on demand by week, and if you're seeing a demand of 40 or an 80, it tells you when you need that 80, so you can decide whether you need to take that action right away or not. So this is the inventory allocation. Because as I mentioned, we create an issue transaction when you allocate inventory to a manufacturing transaction, so it shows up as an issue. But prior to creating the issue transaction, we will still show you what quantity you have on work orders and supply being you if it's on a work order to be manufactured, demand if it's on as a component. We'll show you this information, and as you put the transaction through the work order transaction, if you allocate it and release it, then of course the issue becomes updated here. This is a work order transaction. So earlier we saw how we can create a work order from the calculated quantity to produce layer import AP scheme. Here we're creating a work order in the work order entry program. Notice it could be for a sales order. You enter the item, you basically create the manufacturing transactions here. And when you're printing a work order, you have a traveler that you can print, or you can print a traveler in the barcoded format. And each one of these barcodes could be set up to start or end or stop, or if you're doing labor entry or release or allocate a work order transaction. So you can have a barcodes defined, and you scan the barcode. It knows a manufacturing transaction. You just allocated the inventory, or you're releasing a manufacturing transaction, or if you're tracking labor to start and end the labor. So if you want to do that, if you want to enter that as opposed to basically going to manufacturing transaction into the quantity station. So this is the manufacturing transaction. As we mentioned, we create one for every step in the routing process, and this is where the components get loaded. So in this example, we're creating that manufacturing, that Christmas candy cane collection. These are the components that were grouped to be loaded in this transaction, in this routing step. So it loaded them all in here. It could be serialized or non-serialized. Notice that could be on hold. There's QC steps that if you've defined would be loaded there, and it will be logged if you've entered any QC notes. You have the tabs for labor and non-stock items, so you can enter those. And for the labor, you have start time, end time to track the labor that goes into the manufacturing. As I mentioned, you could also create sales orders from work orders. If it's a made to order item, in the sales order, this checkbox becomes available. And you can click on it and click on generate work order, and the system will display one or multiple items that are on the sales order that could be manufactured. And right from here, you can create the manufacturing work order. As I've mentioned, if any components or labor need to be loaded back into the sales order, you could do that. Now, we're using this functionality also to do repairs. There's RM type transactions that customers use to bring a product back into a stock, create work order transactions to do the repair work right from here. load the components, the parts and labor used to do the repair back into the sales transaction, and ship the product back to the customer with the labor and parts added to it. So, we have a good number of clients using this to do their repair work and bill customers for part and labor that was consumed, and use the scheduling board to schedule the repair work orders. This is on the sales order. If you wanted the system to tell you the available to promise date, you basically would do that based on the other transactions that are in that Fork Center machine. It will come back and tell you when you can promise that. This is the screen. So where if a manufacturing transaction is set up to issue to sales, would bring up this screen when you release that step in the manufacturing process, allowing you to load the labor and components entered into the sales order. Now, if it came from an existing sales order, it would show that. If not, you can create a new sales order, a new invoice. You need to ship the product back, you would do it with a sales order, invoice, or basically do the sales order right from here. This is where you set up a QC step for each one of these. So I'm here for this step in the manufacturing process. We're telling the system that these two QC functions need to be performed. And by QC functions, you could set up specific problems that could be identified. You could set up resolution codes for that problem, so users can only select one of those problems or resolutions or other, of course. And of course, you can set up if some step approval is required, and all of these QC functions are logged and tracked. Manufacturing transactions, and then you see the QC notes here that have been entered, who entered what QC notes. Overhead allocation, you can have overhead allocation up to 3 of them for manufacturing transaction into the QC functions. And here we're seeing the, if you told the item that that's a process manufacturing item, then basically some information becomes available here. Default batch size, net batch size, component by percentage. So you're entering, if you're making the same batch of paint in 30-gallon or 50-gallon batch, it would automatically tell you what amount of each one of the different colors you need to use based on the percentage. So it will do that for you. And notice that if this tab finished good becomes available, where you're telling it to create purple color paint, you need green, orange, white, 40%, 50%, 10% to bring into its ingredients. That's its type that we add, and it's going to then fill it into the finished goods that are entered in this tab. We're looking at the finished good tab, and we're seeing yes, we can load that ingredient in the 1, 2, and 5 liter cans. And what the system does, it creates manufacturing transactions, one for mixing the 3-color paint, and then looking at the routings for each one of these items. Will create additional items, additional manufacturing transactions to fill or label, put a label on the can, and we'll create different kit assembly transactions for each one of these finished goods, but would allocate the components accordingly based on the ratio that you've defined when entering the kit specification, the ratio between a 1 liter and 3 liter and 5 liters, so it knows when you used it, how many of each you consumed, what could be used. And this, we're looking at the kit specification for the 5 liter. It has a can, it has a cap, it could have a label, and so forth and so on. And this is the kit assembly that gets generated for the 1 liter. So 1 liter finished good, 1 liter can of paint gets a can, gets a cap, and gets a proper portion of the 3 different color paints. This is where you set up your QC. If you want to do QC, this is a standalone add-on. But what it does, it lets you define for each item in the stock item of Acumatica where QC function is to be performed. If you're doing a kit assembly, if you're doing a manufacturing transaction, if you're doing a PO receipt, if you're doing a service order. So basically what it does, when let's say you're doing a PO receipt, it will receive the product in the QC location, and once you complete the QC, it would move it to its main location automatically, would create the transfer. Same thing with manufacturing transaction. The manufacturing transaction has a QC function. When you complete and you release the kit assembly, it would put it into the QC location. Once you've performed the QC, which has its own worksheet with the signature capture and all of that, will move the product, transfer the product from there to the main warehouse. Equipment, scheduled services. So if you have equipment that you're using to do construction and you want to manage your scheduled services, again, we have this enhancement where it will let you define annually, quarterly what you need to do. And just like the QC, we'll load them in a worksheet where you see what items need QC, and you can even run it to have the system go through the items and see what QCs need to be performed based on either days or a meter-based information, and then load them for you. So that's a quick overview of the PowerPoint-based overview. I'm going to bring up the program, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the scheduling board to show you the scheduling board that we have. So as I've mentioned, our scheduling board lets you define the different work centers that are in the system. Now, based on the user, each user can have different scheduling board views showing different machines. So if your operation has certain machines that are doing filling versus welding, and the different managers in charge of those functions, they can create a view that just shows those machines instead of all the machines. But each one of these operation codes could be moved from one to the other. If something's going to take longer, you can set up. If you want to open it, you could click on the manufacturing transaction, and it would open the manufacturing transaction for you, where you see what you need to do for that transaction. If you need to change the status, you right-click on it and change the status from job completed to put it back on the shop floor. We need to do something with it, and it will change the color to that. So again, as many views, and this is where you create the filters. You can create a filter that just shows a specific type, different date ranges, different statuses, and on and on. And so you can go to the work order, manufacturing transaction with a double click on it, it opens. So this is one thing. If you don't want to open it, if you just want to click on it, below it will just show you information about it. The next program that I want to spend some time showing you is this calculate quantity period. So this is an MRP program. So basically here we're looking at that Christmas decoration, and we've told it that show us even the items that have zero demand. We haven't told it to show the what if quantities. This is the what if that you can upload from a file, and it lets you define your own Excels and choose the file and do that. So you can do that just fine. Or you could basically come in here and select whether you want to look at your Christmas decorations or batteries, and these items in the grid would change with the executive desk items and so forth and so on. As I mentioned, you have 3 structures that you can see. So when you click on it, it would bring up the 3 structures. You can see what items are here. That has its level, this has its level. And as you click on any of them, it changes the item and it shows what you need to perform to do that function. So manufacturing trade, regardless of how many level it goes down, it shows you the information is available from here, from work order entry and so forth. So you can see all the transactions. So when you see any number and you're wondering how that became calculated, how was that calculated, you click on the show calculations. We bring up this and we'll show you exactly how we reached that. If you want to see the other transactions for that item, we'll show you all the other transactions for that item. So you can, now if this is the item and you want to create a work order for it, you can easily do that from here, or manufacturing transaction order. So create PO will let you create a PO basically for the items that you set up as a replenished payment. Transfers for the items that the replenishment source is transferred. Work order will let you create the work order. So, and as I mentioned, you have different things to do here. Switch to something that has a bit more demand. So hopefully, yeah. So if you see a calculated demand of 111, you can click demand by weeks, and it will basically go through and say what you need in each week. So you could see that demand of yours that you have by week, as opposed to, and if you decide that, okay, you know what, I have this and I want to generate a work order for 4 of it or 1 of it, you can just click on create work order, and it will go ahead and create your work order. It will show you the options that you have for it, and it will let you create your work orders for that item. or if it's an item that you're buying, you can easily create the work order for it. You can enter the preferred vendor that you want. Now, if you had a preferred vendor defined for the item, it would load it from the stock items for it. You can select it, and then if it's the calculated command is 0, you can put in a quantity of 4, click on create PO, and it will go ahead and create a purchase order for you right from here. So one of the things that we've done, we've tried to, if I go into, just quickly show you the transactions by going to the purchase orders. I would see a purchase order created. Or if I go into the work orders, I will see a work order created for us. So basically, I'm running out of time. I think we're going to expand this, go a little bit more than 30 minutes, but there's a lot of functionality. So what we've created is an AcuWorkOrder product that is very easy to implement. You can implement it quickly, but it has a lot of functionality for doing different type of things, from repairs to manufacturing, managing your outside process, managing your QC. So please feel free to reach out to us to schedule a demo, show you what you like to see, or talk to you about your specific needs. Thank you, Raisa. Turning it back over to you.
Thanks, Alec. And I do see some questions here, but since we are out of time, I will be sending a response along with my follow-up email. I just want to thank everybody for your time, and please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye-bye.